Last summer, something weird happened. A bloke in a MAGA hat, all fired up, stood outside the Department of Justice in Washington and loudly, unequivocally, called anti-fascists terrorists. 48 hours later, across the Atlantic, on the steps of a council estate in Rotherham, a place that couldn't be further from Washington, D.C., a local councillor, who'd never even set foot in the States, repeated that exact same sentence, word for word. Same phrase, same venom, same cameras, oddly enough. Coincidence? Not a chance. This was a direct import, straight from the American culture wars to our shores. Donald Trump, bless his controversial cotton socks, didn't invent the word Antifa. It's been around for ages, describing a loose, decentralized, anti-fascist movement. But what he absolutely did was weaponize it. He took a relatively obscure term and turned it into a political cudgel. In June 2020, he dropped a tweet bomb declaring that the United States would designate Antifa as a terrorist organization. Now, let's get a quick legal reality check. American presidents can't just slap that label on domestic groups willy-nilly, not like you'd ban some foreign militia. The legal framework simply isn't there for it. But what they can do, and what Trump did with chilling effectiveness, is fundamentally shift the conversation. He pulled the pin on a rhetorical grenade. Overnight, this diffuse, often leaderless network of anti-fascists went from being a fringe concern to public enemy number one on every right-wing talk show and news channel. Fox News, ever eager for a juicy narrative, ran 83 segments in just the next month that prominently featured the phrase Antifa violence. Suddenly, Facebook groups with names like Patriot Defense saw their membership double, sometimes even triple. The message was brutally simple and disturbingly effective. If you dared to dislike fascists, then you were the real fascist. It was a masterclass in political jujitsu, flipping the script entirely and painting dissent as domestic terrorism. Culture war exports, it turns out, travel incredibly light. No customs forms, no pesky tariffs, just pure, unadulterated talking points. They're like digital viruses, and two key ingredients make them spread like wildfire: existing local grievances, already simmering under the surface, and media outlets desperate for heat, often prioritizing it over actual light. Britain, sadly, has both in spades. We're already a nation constantly arguing about statues, Brexit, who gets to speak on campus, and whether milk and tea is an abomination. Drop the word Antifa into that already bubbling stew, and suddenly you've given every radio host, every columnist, every pub bore a brand new bogeyman. A bogeyman who is conveniently both everywhere and frustratingly impossible to pin down. In the UK, the far-right brand has been pretty much toxic since the British National Party spectacularly collapsed. People generally don't want to be seen openly aligning with overt racism or fascism. So rebranding opposition to the far-right as Antifa extremism is a genius, albeit insidious move. It completely flips the script. Suddenly, the anti-racists become the bullies, the violent aggressors, while the actual racists and bigots are magically transformed into free speech martyrs, valiantly standing up against the woke mob. It's a masterclass in political jujitsu, flipping the script entirely and painting dissent as domestic terrorism.
Talk radio is arguably the fastest courier for these imported narratives. A single inflammatory segment on LBC, for example, can bounce within hours to Spiked Online, then get picked up by the Telegraph comment pages, and then loop right back to talk radio, all within a 24-hour news cycle. Each outlet, of course, adds its own fresh coat of outrage, amplifying the message and making it seem more widespread than it might actually be. The BBC, bless its cotton socks, usually tries to hedge with phrases like so-called Antifa, using scare quotes to maintain a semblance of journalistic neutrality. But honestly, those scare quotes usually arrive too late. The association, the negative connotation, is already glued firmly to the brain of the listener or reader. Now add Facebook's algorithmic rocket fuel to this already potent mix, And you've got a self-pedaling fury cycle that's almost impossible to stop. Imagine a Sheffield United fan page with its 12,000 followers suddenly posting a meme calling anti-racist football fans Antifa scum. That post, fueled by outrage and tribalism, gets 3,000 shares. The local paper, sniffing a story, runs a piece about fans' fears regarding these supposed extremists. Politicians, eager to appear decisive, then demand an inquiry into football hooliganism or activist groups. The loop is complete, and by the end of it, nobody can quite remember what the original protest or issue was even about. The narrative has completely consumed the reality. Does any of this stuff, this online rhetoric, this media frenzy, actually stay on the internet? Ask the protesters in Bristol. In March 2021, when a Kill the Bill demonstration marched past Bridewell police station, police kettled the crowd, a tactic that often leads to increased tension and confrontation. Then, in the aftermath, reporters and authorities alike began labelling it Antifa-led. The result? Significantly heavier sentencing for those involved. One 21-year-old, for instance, received a shocking 14 months in prison for the seemingly minor act of spraying "No Justice" on a wall. In the sentencing notes, prosecutors specifically cited organised anarchist violence as a factor. Here's the kicker. That phrase didn't originate from local testimony, from a police report on the ground in Bristol. It came directly from a Home Office briefing that, in turn, quoted language used by the US Department of Justice regarding Antifa. It was a chillingly direct copy, paste, and imprison scenario. The imported rhetoric became a tool for harsher legal outcomes, demonstrating the very real, tangible consequences of this narrative transfer. It's not just the media and social platforms. Our own politicians are increasingly picking up on this imported language. Tory MP Tom Hunt, speaking at a policy exchange webinar last October, explicitly stated, "We must learn from President Trump's decisive action against Antifa." Think about that for a moment. An elected British official openly advocating for lessons from a US president's controversial rhetoric about a domestic group. Miriam Cates, another backbencher, went a step further, tabling a written question asking whether the Home Office monitors Antifa-affiliated organisations. The department, ever so careful, replied that it doesn't comment on operational matters. Now, on the surface, that sounds neutral, doesn't it? But by refusing to directly deny the premise, by not correcting the insinuation that Antifa is a definable, monitorable entity, they effectively let the accusation stand. Meanwhile, the Labour leadership, perpetually terrified of looking soft on crime or unpatriotic, largely stays silent on the issue. This vacuum, this lack of a strong counter-narrative from the opposition, is the absolute win condition for the imported narrative. It allows the frame to solidify unchallenged, making it seem like a universally accepted truth rather than a politically manufactured one. The impact goes even deeper, right into the fabric of law enforcement. Greater Manchester Police, according to documents leaked to Open Democracy, now use the term Antifa-related disorder in their internal logs. This is a massive red flag. Why? Because no legal definition for Antifa or Antifa-related disorder currently exists in British law. So what does it mean? Essentially, the label becomes whatever the officer on duty decides it is. Once it's in the file, it's in the file, becoming part of a person's record, potentially influencing future interactions with law enforcement. Defence solicitors are reporting a disturbing trend. Clients accused of public order offences are suddenly facing group association evidence that consists of little more than retweets, social media likes, or even just protest badges. The legal bar for proving conspiracy hasn't technically moved, but the pervasive rhetoric, the constant drumbeat of Antifa violence, subtly but significantly lowers jury sympathy. It creates a prejudgment, making it easier for prosecutors to paint a picture of organised, dangerous criminality, even when the evidence is tenuous.
Here's where the irony gets really thick. The very same media outlets and political voices that decry Antifa as a threat to society are often the loudest champions of free speech. The contradiction, however, dissolves pretty quickly if you realize the goal isn't consistency or even free speech for all. It's about controlling who gets to speak. By successfully branding anti-fascists as dangerous extremists, you create a chilling effect across the board. You make everyone who might consider opposing the next Nigel Farage rally or protesting against a far-right march think twice. Take the case of a school teacher in Newcastle. She attended a peaceful Stand Up to Racism march, a legitimate expression of democratic protest. Weeks later, she was suspended after a parent emailed the headmaster screenshots of her supposed Antifa links. The link? A Facebook photo where she was holding a sign that simply read, "Refugees Welcome." The local paper, eager to sensationalize, ran the headline, "Teacher in Antifa Row." She was eventually reinstated after 6 weeks, but the message was received loud and clear by everyone watching. March, speak out, and you may be next. The fear of being wrongly labeled and the very real consequences that can follow becomes a powerful disincentive. Proscription is the nuclear option, the ultimate legal weapon. Under the Terrorism Act 2000, the Home Secretary possesses the power to ban any group deemed to commit or promote terrorism. Once a group is banned, membership becomes a criminal offense. Police can seize their assets, and border officers gain the authority to refuse entry to suspected affiliates. Extending that to Antifa would be a legal mess of epic proportions, precisely because, as academics and activists will tell you, Antifa isn't a club you join. It's more of a stance you take, a loose ideology, a set of tactics. There's no membership card, no central leadership, no formal structure. Still, messy has never stopped this home office before. Consider Palestine Action, a climate justice group which was threatened with proscription last year despite having no history of violence. The mere threat alone was enough to freeze donations and scare off venues, severely impacting their ability to operate. The same toolkit, if aimed at Antifa, wouldn't just target a specific organization. It would effectively criminalize a broad, amorphous slice of left-wing activism, making legitimate protests incredibly risky and potentially illegal. Here's the stark, chilling symmetry of it all. While Antifa becomes increasingly toxic, a byword for violent extremism, actual far-right violence often gets repackaged, softened, and individualized as a lone wolf frustration. Remember the man who firebombed an immigration center in Dover in October 2022? He had a swastika on his phone and a copy of The Turner Diaries, a notorious white supremacist novel. The BBC's initial headline? Man with grievance attacks center. Compare that to the coverage of anti-fascist graffiti. Antifa vandals strike. One ideology, one act of violence is presented as an individual's personal angst, a singular aberration. The other, the opposition to fascism, is collectivized, attributed to a shadowy, violent group. That double standard isn't accidental. It's the quiet, insidious victory of the imported narrative. It shapes how we perceive threats, who we fear, and whose actions we deem legitimate or illegitimate. Activists, being resourceful, are adapting to this new hostile environment. Groups like the London Antifa Assembly are consciously moving away from the traditional black bloc uniforms, which are easily demonized, and are now organizing under deliberately bland, non-threatening names like Residents Against Racism, Community Safety Patrol. The disguise for now seems to work, but it also serves as an undeniable proof that the chilling effect has succeeded. It forces activists to obscure their true purpose to avoid immediate delegitimization. Other organizers, however, are choosing to double down, but smartly. Youth demand activists, for instance, wear bright neon colors instead of black, making them harder to paint as shadowy figures.
They chant clear, unambiguous slogans like "No Nazis on our streets," leaving little room for misinterpretation. And crucially, they film everything. Every interaction, every moment is documented. This footage isn't just for posterity, it's insurance against the inevitable edited clips that will be used by hostile media to make them look like the aggressors. It's a cat and mouse game played out in the streets with a tabloid press that has already written the headline before the protest even begins. Let's inject a bit of academic sanity into this. Dr. Joe Mulhall, a leading expert from Hope Not Hate, explains it perfectly. Antifa is a bloc, not an organization. Prescribing it is like trying to prescribe people who like drum and bass. It's a collective identity, a shared ideology, not a formal group with the membership list. You can't ban an idea. Furthermore, the Center for Analysis of the Radical Right reports that British Antifa activity actually peaked way back in 2019 and has been on a decline ever since. And for those worried about violence, Crest Advisory data reveals that injuries sustained at far-right rallies outnumber injuries caused by anti-fascists by a staggering 4-to-1. The numbers, the actual data, paints a very different picture from the one peddled by the media. But here's the rub, isn't it? Numbers, facts, and nuanced analysis never travel as well or as fast as emotionally charged memes and sensationalist soundbites.
So why is Britain so eager to import America's culture wars? Three powerful forces converge here. First, our media market is utterly saturated with U.S. content. Algorithms, frankly, don't respect oceans or national borders. What trends in America quickly finds its way to our screens and feeds. Second, our partisan press, increasingly fragmented and struggling for attention, needs cheap heat more than ever. American imports arrive prepackaged, pre-outraged, and ready to go. They're a low-effort, high-impact way to generate clicks and ratings. Third, Brexit, for all its promises, utterly scrambled our traditional left-right political axes. Suddenly, politicians are hunting for new identities, new enemies, new narratives to rally around. Antifa offers a ready-made villain, a convenient scapegoat. It works for conservatives who want to sound tough on woke extremism, and it works for fringe speakers and commentators who want to sound relevant and tap into a ready-made audience of outrage. It's a perfect storm of media, politics, and technology. When protest becomes terrorism, when dissent is equated with dangerous extremism, something fundamental shifts. Governments stop listening and start jailing. That, my friends, fundamentally undercuts the basic bargain of liberal democracy. You can shout, you can march, you can disagree, as long as you don't punch. Blur that line, and you get what political scientist Erica Chenoweth calls negative participation. People start to stay home. They disengage. Why? Because marching, speaking out, feels too risky, too dangerous. Fewer feet on the street means fewer checks on power, less accountability for those in charge. The irony here is thick enough to slice with a butter knife. A narrative born in Trump's America, designed to silence opposition, is now actively helping British Tories dodge accountability, to dismiss legitimate concerns, and to consolidate power. It's a dangerous game, and we're all paying the price. If any of this felt a bit one-sided, if you're thinking I'm just pushing an agenda, then hit pause right now. Go and Google UK far-right convictions 2023. Read the court reports, compare the sentences, really dig into the details. Then come back and tell me, honestly, that the scales of justice are balanced. The comments are open below. Keep it civil, keep it evidenced, and let's talk. So what's an ordinary person to do in the face of all this? First, know your local law. Sections 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act 1986 give police considerable power to impose conditions on marches and assemblies. Learn them. Understand your rights so you can spot when officers overstep their authority. Second, if you're filming a protest, please, for the love of all that's good, film horizontally, not vertically. Courts absolutely hate shaky portrait mode clips. Good, stable landscape footage is far more useful as evidence.
Third, write to your MP. Seriously, they still count letters and emails. When newspapers label protesters as terrorists, when ministers parrot foreign rhetoric, let your elected representative know you're paying attention. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, support the groups that track this stuff. Organizations like Hope Not Hate, Netpal, and the Monitoring Group. Even a $5, a $10 buys printer ink for those vital Know Your Rights leaflets, helps fund legal advice, and ensures that someone is keeping tabs on the erosion of our civil liberties. Looking ahead, I reckon we can expect three distinct trends to emerge from this imported conflict. One, we'll see more use of the term Antifa by centrist politicians. They'll want to sound tough, to appeal to a certain segment of the electorate without actually having to ban anything or get into messy specifics. It's a convenient dog whistle. Two, expect attempts to tack Antifa clauses onto unrelated bills. Think about amendments to things like the Online Safety Act, subtly expanding its scope to target vaguely defined extremist groups, which could easily be interpreted to include anti-fascist activists. And three, a counter-push by Labor's left wing. They'll try to reclaim anti-fascism as a proud, patriotic heritage, perhaps even wrapping themselves in the Churchill flag, reminding people that fighting fascism is a deeply British value. Whichever side ultimately wins this crucial language war will effectively decide who gets policed, who gets prosecuted, and who gets ignored in the public square. If any of this felt a bit one-sided, if you're thinking I'm just pushing an agenda, then hit pause right now. Go and Google UK far-right convictions 2023. Read the court reports, compare the sentences, really dig into the details. Then come back and tell me, honestly, that the scales of justice are balanced. The comments are open below. Keep it civil, keep it evidenced, and let's talk. So what's an ordinary person to do in the face of all this? First, know your local law. Sections 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act 1986 give police considerable power to impose conditions on marches and assemblies. Learn them. Understand your rights so you can spot when officers overstep their authority. Second, if you're filming a protest, please, for the love of all that's good, film horizontally, not vertically. Courts absolutely hate shaky portrait mode clips. Good, stable landscape footage is far more useful as evidence. Third, write to your MP. Seriously, they still count letters and emails. When newspapers label protesters as terrorists, when ministers parrot foreign rhetoric, let your elected representative know you're paying attention. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, support the groups that track this stuff. Organizations like Hope Not Hate, Netpal, and the Monitoring Group. Even a $5 or $10 buys printer ink for those vital Know Your Rights leaflets, helps fund legal advice, and ensures that someone is keeping tabs on the erosion of our civil liberties. Looking ahead, I reckon we can expect three distinct trends to emerge from this imported conflict. One, we'll see more use of the term Antifa by centrist politicians. They'll want to sound tough, to appeal to a certain segment of the electorate without actually having to ban anything or get into messy specifics. It's a convenient dog whistle. Two, expect attempts to tack Antifa clauses onto unrelated bills. Think about amendments to things like the Online Safety Act, subtly expanding its scope to target vaguely defined extremist groups, which could easily be interpreted to include anti-fascist activists. And three, a counter-push by Labor's left wing. They'll try to reclaim anti-fascism as a proud, patriotic heritage, perhaps even wrapping themselves in the Churchill flag, reminding people that fighting fascism is a deeply British value. Whichever side ultimately wins this crucial language war will effectively decide who gets policed, who gets prosecuted, and who gets ignored in the public square. Trump's war on Antifa was never just about those black-clad kids in Portland or some abstract notion of American domestic terrorism. It was at its heart about exporting a template that transforms legitimate opposition to fascism into a security threat, a criminal enterprise. Britain, it seems, bought that template, laminated it, and is now diligently using it to redraw the very borders of legitimate protest and free expression within our own country. The word Antifa still sounds foreign, still carries that American twang, but the policing strategy, the rhetorical framework, the chilling effect, that's becoming undeniably British law and practice. Next time you hear a minister rage against extremists, listen closely for the accent. It might be from here, but the script, the playbook, almost certainly started its journey across the Atlantic. And what starts in America, my friends, rarely, if ever, truly stays there.